Can I remind councillors and officers to use microphones and request that those attending the meeting ensure that all mobile phones and other communication devices are in silent mode. Can I also remind those attending the meeting that it will be recorded. The recording will be available on YouTube via the Council's website following the meeting. We have on item A1 tribute to Councillor Ian Campbell. When we all started this budget process a few months ago, we didn't know in our wildest dreams expect that Council Leader Ian Campbell would not be here to present the administration's budget this afternoon. As this is the first full council meeting since Ian died, I think it would be appropriate that we all stand and observe a minute's silence in his memory. Do you all agree? Thank you, councillors. Now, have we any apologies for today's meeting? No. None. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of terms of business on the agenda today? Right.
Provost, I have a non-financial interest on item 3 as a voting member, of the Integration Joint Board.
I've got a non-financial interest in Live Active Leisure, Horse Cross and Perth and Kinross Countryside Trust.
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I have a non-financial interest in item 3 in regard to being a trustee on Horsecross Arms. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I have a non-financial interest as a member of the Perth and Kinross Integration Joint Board in item 3.
Non-financial interest in the Live Active Board.
Non-financial interest in the IGB.
I have a non-financial interest in Perth and Kinross Countryside Trust.
I have a non-financial interest.
Non-financial interest, the board member of Culture, Perth and Kinross.
I have a non-financial interest as a member of the IJB and of Culture, Perth and Kinross.
A non-financial interest in Live Active Leisure and Teesside Contracts.
I have a non-financial interest as member of the IJB.
Non-financial interest in Teesside Contracts.
Non-financial interest in Teesside Contracts.
Oh, Councillor Dugan.
Provost, a non-financial interest in Tayside contracts also.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Provost. A non-financial interest in Tayside contracts.
A non-financial interest in Tayside contracts.
Thank you. I think that's a record. Right. Can I also remind members on the terms of paragraph 518(1) of the Councillors' Code of Conduct, which gives a general exclusion for councillors in relation to the setting of the council tax. The code states that councillors do not have a financial interest which has to be declared in connection with the setting of the council tax. There is therefore no need for any councillor to declare an interest in that regard and leave the room. Any member who has any doubt about the position, we can take further advice from our Head of Legal Governance. Okay. Item 3, report number 2, revenue budget. Can I ask Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to respond, please? Are there any questions on the report? None. Thank you, Stuart. Can I just remind you, in terms of Standing Order 38, no member may speak for more than 5 minutes at any one time in a debate except by permission of the convener. It is traditional that at budget meetings, the movers of the motion and amendments are allowed to speak for more than 5 minutes, but that all other speakers will be kept to time. Can I ask Councillor Lyle to move the motion? I think committee services will be distributing the motion just before.
Can I ask officers to circulate the motion, please?
Yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can I ask everybody just to put on their mics, please, to recharge them all, please? Just hit them once. Just hit them once and they'll come back on.
Thank you very much, Provost. Sorry for the slight delay. I noticed Councillor Bailey yawn, but hopefully we'll keep his attention for the next few minutes. Provost, it is with pride tinged with sadness that I bring forward this first budget from a Conservative-led Perth and Kinross Council administration in 2 decades. Firstly, I would like to commend the work of my friend, the late Ian Campbell, in steering this administration through the budget process, right up until his untimely death just over 2 weeks ago. His influence on this budget is evident, and many of his ideas form the basis of our proposals today. The partnership administration that I now lead has put aside any political differences to work together in the best interests of our constituents. The budget I present today reflects the collective priorities of the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, Labour and independent councillors who make up our administration. I would personally like to thank them all for their contributions to the budget process. Our administration's budget has high ambitions for the people of Perth and Kinross. Today we set out a budget with 4 central themes. They are children and families, fairness, local infrastructure and rural economic development. Provost, I am confident that these themes will find support across the Chamber and in our communities. Before I speak about these themes in greater depth, I would like to describe the context in which this budget will be set out for the years ahead. Last year's report by external auditors highlighted the Council's strong financial position, its financial management and its commitment to forward planning and its effective governance. I have always been encouraged by the consensus across the political divide in this chamber of the importance of careful stewardship of the Council's finances. However, in that context, over the past 8 years, the Scottish Government has made the political choice to significantly reduce in real terms the funding for this Council. Despite the recent accommodation reached at Holyrood, this Council will still see in a real terms cut of 2.5% in the year 18-19. It is with this cut to our budget in mind that we are forced to propose a 3% increase in council tax for 18-19 and an indicative rise at the same level for the following 2 years. While this will only cost a Band D household around 67p a week, it will generate approximately 2.4 million of additional funds for this council. That is the same as the annual salaries for around 60 teachers. On that note, Provost, I shall turn to the first of our central themes, children and families. Perth and Kinross Council has a strong record of educational excellence, and our budget today aims to build on that long-standing success. Our children are the future, and we need to equip them with the knowledge and skills they need to prepare for the world at work and life in general. With this in mind, we are today proposing to reinstate almost 5 million into the Education and Children's Services budget, and are investing an extra £900,000 to support our young people. Teachers play the most crucial role in education of our children. It is vital that we protect their numbers, and I am pleased to confirm that our proposals today will ensure that our pupil-teacher ratio continues to be better than the national average. We are proposing to fully protect primary school teacher numbers and to ensure that class sizes in English and Maths in our secondary schools continue to be well below the statutory maximum. We propose to reinstate funding to school improvement officers who work to raise levels of attainment in our schools. We also intend to fully restore the supply contingency budget to ensure that schools are able to get supply teachers when they are needed. It is extremely important that schools have the resources that they require to ensure that our children have the best possible learning experience. That is why we are not only reinstating the devolved school management budget that head teachers can use to fund essential items such as textbooks, but we're also investing £250,000 into technology to support new digital learning strategy in our schools. In addition, we intend to restore Parent Council funding to its current levels in recognition of the important role that they play in the life of our schools. We are rejecting the proposed saving in school crossing patrollers in full to ensure that our children can get to school safely while we examine alternative options. Beyond teachers and textbooks, there are many other ways to ensure that our children can get the best start in life. Today I can announce that we are committing £200,000 towards closing the poverty-related attainment gap through a range of interventions. In addition, it is important that our educational offering does not just progress our children academically, but that it also supports other forms of learning. And to that end, we are protecting apprenticeships and vocational courses provided by Perth College, while also investing in enhancing the Council's own modern apprenticeship schemes. Wider achievement in our schools is also incredibly important, and we are therefore reinstating the budget for primary school swimming lessons to teach our youngsters this vital skill in life, putting funding towards increasing access to our instrumental music service and allocating funding to support programs that help our children to develop and cooperate in leadership skills. We are also very much committed to doing all that we can to support our vulnerable children and families. For this reason, we are today fully reinstating the budgets for educational psychologists who deliver a wide range of services. We are also reinstating inclusion teachers who will provide targeted support to children with additional support needs. We are also protecting funding for staff that focus on children facing poverty and those requiring protection from harm. We are also protecting the budget for classes that deliver a range of programs to vulnerable families and the creche facilities that allow them to make use of these classes. We shall also be making money available to help support the setting up of volunteer-led Safe Start clubs. Moreover, we are committed to supporting our young carers by recognising the pressures that they are under and assisting them in their educational attainment. Provost, we will be also investing $150,000 for advocacy services to protect the best interests of our young people in their times of need. These measures clearly demonstrate this administration's commitment to education and recognise the incredibly important role that education plays in our society today. I'll move on to our second theme. Excuse me. Our second theme is fairness. Provost, our administration wants to ensure that Perth and Kinross is a fair society for all its residents. We are committed to implementing the recommendations of the Fairer Futures report, and to that end, our budget today commits over £1 million towards making a fairer society for Perth and Kinross. That extra funding will support a number of the Council's key partners. I am delighted to announce a further funding towards Perth Food Bank project. This will protect vital support to some of our citizens in time of need. Importantly, our budget today is able to provide a number of our key partners with more certainty. We're able to do this by offering them a multi-year funding package for the first time. In addition, this administration is committed to making sure that sports, culture and arts are open and accessible to all. And we therefore are proposing to reinstate over £300,000 into the culture and leisure services. This sum will protect the 2018-19 budgets for Live Active Leisure, Horsecross Arts, Culture, Perth and Kinross. Provost, we will fully reinstate the grant for Pitlochry Festival Theatre, which makes such a significant contribution to the economy of Highland Perthshire. Turning to the provision of health and social care in Perth and Kinross, for the first time, the Integration Joint Board will set its own budget, and we therefore have to set a spending envelope within which they will fund their services. This administration has therefore decided to give the IGB a 0.4% uplift in their funding for 18-19 to match the settlement the Council has received from the Scottish Government. The budget allocated for the IGB in 1920 and 2021 is provisional at this stage. That is to allow the IGB to develop its first integrated budget. Therefore, this will allow the IGB to complete a review of the strategic commissioning plan and to agree a detailed transformation programme. We will work with the IGB to develop their plans, to assess their cost pressures and savings going forward. We will also support them in their budget setting process for years 2 and 3 of this budget. To support this process of change, the Council will be transferring significant finance to the IGB. We will also support access to organisation development resources, to health and social care partnership, which will enhance their capacity to accelerate this process of change. These proposals highlight our commitment to ensure that Perth and Kinross is a fairer society for all. My third theme is local infrastructure. Since this administration came to power, Provost, a number of long-standing projects in Perth have progressed considerably. These include plans for the reuse of the Perth City Hall as a cultural venue and the successful reopening of McEwan's, the former McEwan's department store, as Beals. For too long, however, our rural communities have felt left behind by this council, and in our budget today, we aim to rebalance the council's spending to better support the rest of the region. Many of the savings proposals outlined in the report would have a disproportionate effect on our towns and villages outside Perth. Today, Provost, I am delighted to confirm that we are proposing to reinstate over $4 million to the Environment Service. This will protect those services on which our rural constituents depend. This administration has been listening to our communities about the importance they place on investing in our roads network. I am therefore delighted to commit a further £600,000 towards road safety measures to make our roads safer for all users. This will include funding further vehicle-activated signs and monies to roll out our planned revised 20-mile-an-hour policy. Importantly, Provost, we are protecting the winter maintenance budget in full, and this will ensure that the current level of service on our roads and network and footways is maintained.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, would you like to second the motion?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It seems that we've got sound, if not light. Provost, I would like to acknowledge Councillor Ian Campbell's leadership of this administration's first budget. Ian was committed from the start to have a broad and inclusive budget review with input and buy-in from all groups and parties in the administration. He was determined to make that process work, and I believe that he would have been pleased with the result. This is the first time for 6 years that a Liberal Democrat has stood to second the administration's budget motion, and I'm honoured to do so. This budget has a golden Liberal thread through every fibre of its weave. The watchwords of this budget are fairness, equality and community empowerment. The priorities are to tackle inequalities, support children, families and vulnerable adults, to ensure that our young people get the best possible start in life, to enable their talents to flourish, to deliver more affordable homes as the rock on which citizens and families build their lives, and to support our local economy with investment and support for entrepreneurs and rural business. These are severely challenging times. Council funding is considered the make-weight of Scottish Government spending priorities, a government which has to be dragged kicking and fighting to the last minute away from imposing swinging cuts on council services, and whose smoke and mirrors tactics create the sorts of uncertainties and risks that are highlighted in paragraph 7.3 of the report. Sadly, a Scottish Government which still arrogantly presumes that only it knows best when it comes to setting council taxes, and which caps council tax rises at inflation despite rising demand and above inflation pressures. That government is no friend of localism, local government employees or the communities that we serve. Provost, against the severe constraint of SNP's austerity on this council, we will utilise its council tax raising powers to the full and apply a 3% council tax in each of the 3 years of this budget. That isn't a decision that some of my colleagues arrived at lightly, and I commend them for their convictions in doing so. In response, I can assure council taxpayers that we will continue to steward those resources carefully and prudently. We will maximise the collection of that revenue to deliver high-quality services to our maximum extent, and commend officers of this council for maintaining the second highest council tax collection rate in mainland Scotland at 98%. Turning now to the measures contained within our budget and the savings proposals that we are rejecting, and returning to the three pillars of this budget: fairness, the best start in life and growing the economy. We do that to ensure that people and families get the support they need when they need it, protecting the budget for Play Start, getting it right for every child, maintaining support for victim support and proven community safety programmes such as Safe Drive, Stay Alive. We have rejected savings that would impact on giving every child the best start in life to the value of £800,000, fully reinstating the budget for early years support team, parent and family learning and educational psychologists, maintaining class sizes in first and second year secondary schools in English and maths. We've rejected savings for Grow Biz and put money back into business support to protect and grow our economy so that more jobs can be created. The additional spending proposals in this budget put equalities and fairness front and centre of our programme, making Perth not just a more inclusive city, but widening access and participation for minority groups across all of Perth and Kinross. We're helping to put the finances of our third sector partners on a sounder financial footing, and are endeavouring in really challenging financial times to give longer term certainty of funding. This includes funding to minority ethnic carers, the Minority Communities Hub, Ethnic Minority Law Centre, Disability Athletics and the Saints Project, and that investment totals £500,000. For a long time, the third sector has issued a cri de coeur for 3-year funding. Many local organisations supporting minorities and vulnerable groups have had to struggle not knowing if funding would be coming from one year to the next. In our budget, and for the items under the Fairer Futures, we are giving our partners certainty of funding for 3 years to enable greater continuity of service and longer-term planning of service delivery and development. I am particularly pleased that this administration answered the call for assistance with ongoing costs from the Perth and Kinross Food Bank, the first administration to do so since the food bank was established. And we're very pleased to have already provided substantial support, £10,000 earlier this year to Perth and Kinross Food Bank, and are today committing to double that support to £20,000 for each of the next 3 years. Fairness in supporting vulnerable peoples and families was at the heart of that decision. We're also committing to supporting the Citizens Advice Bureau with funding of over £100,000 to meet their office accommodation costs, putting Perth and Kinross Council's contribution to the CAB in line with other local authorities. This is a proactive budget which recognises the challenges of more people presenting as homeless. I'm determined that this council will lead the way when it comes to pursuing groundbreaking solutions to tackle homelessness and empower frontline staff to be able to respond rapidly to homeless people's needs with personalised budgets. In December this year, this council passed Shelter Scotland's Far From Fixed campaign, and I signalled our intention to implement personalised budgets and seek match funding from the Scottish Government via the Rough Sleepers Homelessness Action Group. In this budget, we have committed £25,000 as recurring money towards fulfilling that pledge. We have invited the RSHEG to Perth next month and will be pressing them to support this pioneering work. Provost, I'm hugely conscious of the impacts that full service rollout of universal credit will have on people seeking work and those on benefits from June this year. Our tenants recognise the urgent need to support their neighbours who find themselves in rent arrears, and we will ensure that this council is capable of responding meaningfully with welfare advice and support through the coming year. And that's why we've pushed back the saving of £93,000 from the Review of Revenues and Benefits team for a year and until after the impacts of full service universal credit scheduled for June this year are clearer. Provost, I'm very happy to second this administration's budget and commend it to all councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Is there any amendments?
Yes, Provost. The SNP group have an amendment, if I could ask for that to be seconded.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Dugan.
Thanks very much. Sorry, Peter? Raising standards, that's what we're all about in the SNP. Provost, thank you. I think initially I too would like to join my colleague Councillor Lyle in paying tribute very briefly to Councillor Ian Campbell. This process of setting the budget for Perth and Kinross Council has been a long one. We've been at this now for nearly 4 months, and throughout that period until very, very recently and very, very suddenly, I expected to be fronting up to my friend Ian Campbell in this chamber today, and it's a source of great regret that I'm not able to do so. Provost, in the first instance, I'd like to record my grateful appreciation and that of the SNP Group to the Council officers for their role in supporting us to formulate this comprehensive, strategic and sustainable budget proposition. I'd like to express, moreover, my thanks to Scott Walker and Alison O'Brien in particular for their professionalism, guidance and tireless good humour over recent months while the SNP BRG group drafted and redrafted this amendment. Nothing, it seemed, was too much trouble, or so they said. Like all councillors in this chamber, I welcome the additional funding which has been awarded to Perth and Kinross Council in the Scottish Government settlement. With the additional 0.4% revenue funding, we have been able to reject the most unpalatable savings proposals which came before us. And it's worth reminding ourselves, Provost, that this allocation was a product of a budget set by an SNP minority government in Parliament with support from other parties, including Liberal Democrats, who put the needs of their constituents ahead of both party politics and constitutional differences. A noble and productive act, and one which I would commend to key councillors in this chamber today. Of course, we would like to see more in the settlement, but like those faced by councils across these islands, our budget is constrained by the UK government's failure to control the deficit that they said they would over 8 years ago, and in the process tripling the UK's national debt. Somebody, Provost, has to pay for this failure, and it's rarely those at the top in Westminster. Provost, the SNP agrees the 18-19 provisional revenue budget of £329.5 million and the 19-20 provisional revenue budget of £321 million and the 2021 revenue budget of £324.5 million. In addition, we agree to carry forward £3.2 million of resources from 17-18 into 18-19 and to apply £2.1 million to the Perth and Kinross Integration Joint Board, subject to the current year-end position, and award £49.1 million to the IGB for the 18-19 from the 18-19 provisional revenue budget. And with respect to this last element, Provost, noting that it is contingent on the IGB's agreement to engage with a strategic review of services which may be delivered from the Beechgrove site in Perth and to apply the full extent of the additional £100,000 detailed in Appendix 4, ring-fenced to support community social work centres in Perth and Kinross. We agree to the pressures across all 3 financial years set out in Appendix D of the report, with the exception of those we have rejected and which are set out in Appendix 1 of our amendment. Similarly, we agree the savings across all 3 years set out in Appendix D, with the exception of those listed in Appendix 2 of our proposals put before you now. Further, we draw attention to seek approval of both the additional SNP savings proposals set out in Appendix 3 of our proposal and the additional expenditure measures detailed in Appendix 5. In order to protect the vital element of the Council's budget, which is reserves, we ask Council to approve an additional £2.3 million contribution to reserves in 18-19 and a subsequent drawdown of £1.3 million in 19-20. This represents a net additional contribution to reserves of £1 million and in so doing ensures that when the unseeable happens in the Council, this Council remains in a position to fund an appropriate and effective response. On Council tax, Provost, we approve the 3% over 17-18 levels, giving a Band D council tax of £1,216 in 18-19 and a final revenue budget in 18-19 of £335.7 million. To do so is consistent with the SNP's position at the budget here last year and is also consistent with the SNP's manifesto for Perth and Kinross, upon which we stood at the election in May. In the SNP, we believe in doing what we said we would do, another key difference between us and some in the Tory party, who last year stood here and said that they would increase council tax by 0% in 17-18 and only 1% in 18-19. It's worth noting, Provost, that had the Tories got their way last year and increased council tax by these metrics, this council would be fully £4 million worse off as we stand here today, and it would be subject to the attendant cuts that would go along with a budget reduction of that level. I'm very pleased to hear Councillor Barrett talk about how he managed to bring the Tories round to a realistic council tax increase, and it makes you wonder what would happen if the Liberal Democrats weren't part of this administration. Contrast this actual fact with the hypocrite crocodile tears of Tory councillors in the papers this week, pledging to protect this service and that. From whom were they seeking to protect these services? They are the administration, Provost. There was nobody going to do it to them. Moreover, Provost, we agree for the same uplift to be applied to the Council's provisional revenue budget for 1920 and 2021, giving an additional revenue budget, a provisional revenue budget of £330.6 million and £333.5 million respectively, against an indicative Band E council tax of £1,215, rising to £1,290 the following year. Finally, on council tax, Provost, we approve the 2% non-collection rate across all 3 years, and we support the recommendation to defer consideration of the composite capital budget and additional general capital grant until June 18. On pressures, our budget, as set out in Appendix 1 of our amendment, rejects the pressures within the corporate and democratic services under communities, believing, as we do, that similar progress can be achieved within current resources, and we have also sought to rephase the investment in car parking infrastructure. Provost, I'd like to turn now to Appendix 2 of my amendment and highlight the key areas where we have rejected savings. In education and children's services, we have rejected savings totalling £5 million. There is simply no sustainable way to reduce capacity in key areas such as English and maths in our secondary schools. Our young learners deserve better than this, and under the SNP, they would get better. Neither will we be seeking to reduce teacher numbers in primary or inclusion. School crossing patrollers are not a luxury, and while they're not a statutory service either, they are nevertheless greatly valued by communities, and we have elected to protect these also. It can seem tempting to reduce provision in less visible areas of the council, Provost, and standing firm against this is the mark of careful and competent decision-making. What this means in practice is not reducing educational psychologists or place start provision, or the school supply contingency budget, or the early years support team. All largely unseen, these services may be, but they are vital nevertheless for those in receipt of their outputs. The SNP will, with this amendment, continue striving to get it right for every child. In the Environment Service, Provost, the area with the least statutory protection for its services, we have rejected savings totalling £3.4 million. We have made other savings where possible, but also worked to protect jobs and capacity for the continued benefit of our local environment here in Perth and Kinross. Many officer proposals have been rejected or amended, from recycling centres to public toilets and winter maintenance, from street cleansing to roads maintenance and discretionary charges. We have visited and revisited every opportunity to reverse cuts, protect jobs, and instead maximise sustainable efficiencies through new ways of working. This council has developed some extremely high-performing relationships over the last 10 years with our partners' organisations. And in our budget, we have sought to reflect the value and esteem with which we hold these organisations. In corporate and democratic services, we have reinstated the budget for PCAVs, and in culture and leisure services, we have reinstated the budgets for Pitlochry Festival Theatre, all village halls, Burnham Arts Centre, and our contracts with Live Active Leisure, Horsecross and Culture Perth and Kinross. If we expect these organisations to deliver high-quality services within our communities, we need to ensure that they are funded as well as possible, consistent with the prevailing financial capacity. In Appendix 3, our additional savings proposals are set out, Provost. Council will see where we have innovated our way out of removing services in favour of redesigning them. With public toilets, we have realised the bulk of the saving proposed by officers by only removing one facility and revising the charging structure and opening times of others. With recycling centres, it would be simply unacceptable to compound the effect of the brown bin charge to close recycling centres out with Perth. It's no use to say to residents, you can take your own waste to the recycling centre if you don't want to buy a permit, only for the council to then go and close those same recycling centres and signpost people to Perth. It's unacceptable for an area the size and shape of Perth and Kinross to have no recycling centres in our large settlements, yet maintain 2 in Perth. The SNP administers for all in Perth and Kinross, and not simply the city. We have also put the brakes on new vehicle replacement within the council's fleet. Substantial improvements have been made to the efficiency and cost of the fleet over the last administration, yet more can still be done with the accelerated by introducing a 25% reduction in new vehicle purchases, with the exception of bin lorries. Many public and private sector organisations are running their vehicles longer and harder, and the council must, we believe, accept this challenge also. We in the SNP wish to make outcomes and opportunities for individuals, families and communities as rewarding as possible. And with the additional funding from the Scottish Government, together with our increasing council tax, we can realise more of these ambitions. Provost, as set out in Appendix 4 of our budget amendment, we will renew the funding the SNP administration put in place last year for the hugely successful Active Under 10s programme, embedding healthy behaviours and attitudes in our young people. Moreover, we will introduce Cycle Smart courses to be coordinated by Live Active Leisure to help kids get out and about on their bikes safely, and we have established recurring funding to employ 2 adverse childhood experience officers to work with children most disadvantaged by their personal circumstances, a new and widely recognised as vital area of support and intervention. To cope with additional demand following the UK Government's introduction of universal credit and the Tories' broader attack on the poorest in our society, we will invest in a further 2 posts in the Council's acclaimed welfare rights team. Similarly, we will provide recurring funding to the Perth and Kinross Food Bank to assist them with lifeline services, with the lifeline services that they provide. And we will continue funding SNP priorities which tackle the causes of poverty and social exclusion by once again investing £35,000 in adult literacy and £44,000 in digital inclusion. A further vital service funded by this council is the Citizens Advice Bureau's Money Advice Service, which the Tories cut from their budget last year. Mercifully, for the hundreds of families who access this service annually, the SNP had more wit than to axe this service while in administration. This particular service, pound for pound, represents astonishingly good value. I'm very pleased to see that it's made an appearance in the administration's motion. And we too have again renewed this funding in recognition of the outstanding support that's provided. In transport, Provost, the Council's flagship parking policy of 15 minutes free parking, designed, funded and implemented by the SNP, will continue to be provided under our budget proposal, and moreover, we have budgeted to hold parking charges at current levels going forward in order to assist with the vibrancy of our retail sectors. The SNP will stand up for embattled residents who face indiscriminate parking by commuters and the chaos which can go along with this. In residential areas of the city, the SNP will fund a £50,000 trial of residential parking permits, and this will initially occur in the Ganachie area of Perth to combat the unsustainable and growing blight of commuter parking within this and other communities. The late night buses trial, Provost, that we undertook last year will be continued with an investment of £69,000 and the deletion of lower demand services. This trial, instigated by the SNP, has yielded valuable data on how we can support travel between our larger settlements and the city later in the evening at weekends. And we can now design a lower cost model with sustainability built in. Many of our roads are in a poor state of repair. The Tories have raided uncommitted reserves to fund improvements and proscribed officers from commissioning temporary repairs in order to save money. There was much talk of increasing hot repairs, but motorists and cyclists alike, to their cost, can see little evidence of any improvement. To take money from the Council's reserves to fund activity which should be financed through revenue is, in my view, reckless. To then provide no discernible improvement for that money, in fact a further deterioration in standards, is unforgivable. Financial competence and the ability to allocate resources strategically, Provost, allows the SNP to commit a further £5 million for our roads over the next 3 years. No raid on reserves, just careful financial planning. So while the Tories repeat their ambition on roads, but with markedly more conversation than action, let's look at the facts. For road improvements, the SNP have invested £2 million in each of the previous 2 years. We're proposing £3 million for the coming year and £2 million for each of the 2 years thereafter. That's not rhetoric, Provost, that's actual fact. On safety, we listen to the well-founded concerns there are regarding road safety. That's why the SNP invested £1.8 million in road safety last year. Building on this investment, we will apply a further £300,000 to road safety measures around schools, and we will allocate an additional £100,000 to improve pedestrian access routes to our schools for families. Small sums, Provost, can make a huge difference to community organisations, and that's why we have allocated over £200,000 to the Minority Ethnic Carers, GrowBiz Rural Enterprise, the Minority Communities Hub, the Saints Project, the Strathmore Cycle Network, the Minority Ethnic Law Centre and Disability Athletics. These are small amounts individually, but each organisation has a track record of making a tremendous and positive difference within localities. Provost, as we have benefited from an increased budget from Scottish Government, it seems appropriate, therefore, that we should extend this dividend to our partner organisations who rely largely or solely on council funding. Accordingly, our budget proposes an increase to the 18-19 funding figure for PCAVs, Live Active Leisure, Culture Perth and Kinross and Horsecross, mirroring our 0.4% increase. And this, of course, is in addition to our budget's rejection of the cuts proposed for these organisations, a double SNP benefit. A new leisure centre for Perth, PH2O, is an essential component of Perth and Kinross's offer over the next 30 years or more, and we need to get this underway in short order. The lack of progress with this project under the present administration is unforgivable and cannot continue. The Tory-led administration will come nowhere near the record at this rate of the SNP over the previous 5 years in terms of commissioning large-scale capital projects from schools to roads and the new Perth Theatre. In recognising this, we have allocated £25,000 to fund an accelerated concept and design programme using, if necessary, external capacity, which will report back within 1 year and which will allow the process of funding allocation for PH2O to begin in earnest. We've wasted enough time. There are too many individual propositions within this SNP amendment to go into in one speech, Provost, and I thank you for your patience whilst I have set out just some of the opportunities the SNP plan to improve Perth and Kinross with. One final element I will touch on, though, is that of the establishment of an income generation officer. It is seemingly an inevitable and frustrating reality of local government that our ambitions are routinely curtailed by legislative and financial constraint. One area where we have talked a lot but made less progress on, that certainly than the SNP would like, is in becoming a more entrepreneurial council. Therefore, we have allocated £150,000 for the establishment of an income generation officer who will specifically have nothing to do with council charges, but more to do with the process of attracting additional recurring income from energy, rent, advertising, consultancy, and an extensive range of other opportunities. This function is well established in other Scottish councils, and it's especially well established in councils in England, from where we could learn a great deal. We anticipate this post will be self-sustaining after 3 years and cash positive thereafter. In conclusion, Provost, I trust it's clear that this is not a 20-minute budget amendment designed simply to fulfil a fleeting role in today's process. We have worked tirelessly and genuinely in the compiling of this prospectus and have done so on the same basis that we would have had we been in administration. This budget is a call to those of us in this chamber who value the discipline of progressive public sector investment in our services and the outcomes which flow from these services to the betterment of our communities. I know political opponents in this chamber who share our belief in tax and spend for the good of our communities, and they will find eventually, I guarantee, an immovable opposition to this value system from their Tory partners, and I would suggest that that will be sooner rather than later. If you think the recent Tory nonsense about private schools was the beginning and end of it, then I fear you're sadly mistaken. The Tory ideology is only ever thinly veiled. Some of the political groups on this council will know from experience of their own, now largely former, parliamentary colleagues what it means to be literally damned by association with the Tories. To think this can't happen here locally, I would suggest, is complacent in the extreme. Provost, tax fairly and spend wisely. That's the tenet of this budget amendment. Those of us here in this chamber who stood for parties whose stated aim is the fairer distribution of wealth and opportunity, whose care is truly for the many, not the few, can come together to support this amendment and let the hard work begin today. It's better, is it not, to park the constitutional cleavage at the door of this building and work together within it for the good of our communities in partnership of a well-aligned left-of-centre progressive value system. Yes, it is. There is politics in my speech, Provost, of course, but I believe this budget amendment affords Perth and Kinross the most positive outlook possible under the current financial constraints of public spending, and I urge my colleagues from whichever party, and none in this chamber, to vote with this amendment and put the people of Perth and Kinross, not the politics of Westminster, first. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan. Councillor Sawa, would you like to second the amendment? Yeah, the movers and seconders have as long as they wish. It's within reason.
Don't worry, I won't be as long. Provost, it is my pleasure to formally second this SNP budget amendment. Recognising the exceptional amount of time and effort which has been applied to creating a budget proposition which successfully reconciles the challenging financial position within the public sector with our need to continue delivering high-quality public services within Perth and Kinross. The priority of our budget amendment is to minimise service reductions and maintain services within our communities right across Perth and Kinross. In order to achieve this goal, we propose increasing council tax by 3%, as we committed to in our published election manifesto. This commitment to invest in communities is evident in the long list of savings our budget has rejected across all the key service areas. In education and children's services, there is no way an SNP budget would remove funding from highly committed parent councils or in any way indulge in the false economy of cuts to the parenting and family learning service, which would simply create far greater demand within the system in years to come. So too, in the environment service, it is simply not tenable to reduce winter maintenance for wider rural communities while protecting services in and around Perth. Instead, the SNP seeks to manage resources fairly and equitably across all of Perth and Kinross, and this amendment offers exactly that. Income from planning will, under our amendment, better reflect charging regimes elsewhere in Scotland, and in this way, by maximising income, we can reduce the pressure for savings and cuts elsewhere. It remains our ambition to invest as much as possible in our communities, but to do so in a way which is financially sustainable and which does not continually dip into our council's reserves fund. We have achieved this within our amendment, and the benefits are clear to see. From investments in demand-responsive transport supporting Loch Tay communities, to funding to enhance the tourism offer at Loch Leven, investing in toilets and other facilities at the Braco Village Hall, providing match funding for the charity Forward Cooperangus to acquire a community retail hub, supporting the development of the Strathmore Cycle Network linking Ailith, Blairgowrie and Cooperangus, and by funding free and accessible sanitary products across Perth and Kinross schools, we will help to fight the cruel effects of period poverty. Ours is a strong and strategic budget proposal. The SNP amendment puts communities and people at the centre of council services, not cuts and closures. Please support this amendment. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Sanwar. Are there any further amendments? No. Can I suggest a recess? Would you like a recess? Right, can I suggest 45 minutes? That gives you time to get up and get a comfort break. Sorry? Yeah, 45 minutes will give you a chance to get up, down, and go to a comfort break and get back down in time. Okay. Thank you, councillors. Can I ask you needing any further time for a debate? I wouldn't have thought so, but I better ask you anyway. No? That's fine. Right, can I invite comments and contributions to the debate, please? Councillor Shires. One of those two rows.
No. Back on. It's working. Thank you, Provost. The budget motion put before Council today is one that builds on the ambitions of our partnership administration and seeks to deliver the very best we can in relation to our economy, the education of our children and support of their families, the strengthening of our communities and ensuring that fairness underpins our service delivery. As convener of lifelong learning, I want to ensure that our pupils, parents and teachers know that we are committed to giving all our young people the very best start in life. Through reinstatement of possible savings and additional investment, there's nearly £6 million which we are ensuring is allocated towards ECS in our motion today. We are rejecting proposals to reduce teacher numbers in our primaries and cuts to teachers who work in inclusion, who provide targeted support to young people with additional needs, particularly at a time when the needs of this group is increasing. In protecting the budget for secondary teachers and maintaining class sizes of 20 in S1 and S2 maths and English, unlike other local authorities, this administration is demonstrating our commitment to improving literacy and numeracy from early years through to the crucial S1 and S2 stage at secondary school. Importantly, we're maintaining our pupil-teacher ratio below the 13.7 national figure. Throughout the budget motion, members will see that our commitment to a range of areas in education and children's services provision will ensure that Perth and Kinross continues to be one of the best places in Scotland for young people to live and learn. This administration are committing additional resources of £200,000 to help target approaches to closing the poverty-related attainment gap. The additional money will be prioritised for schools which receive smaller amounts of pupil equity funding nationally. It will be used creatively by these schools to access staff or resources which can help them best meet all our learners' needs. We are also reinstating funding for our parent councils as a demonstration of our support for improving parental engagement across Perth and Kinross. Provost, former councillor Barbara Vaughan, still missed by many of us, who championed young carers for many years, would be pleased to see our commitment to the corporating parenting obligations of this council and money being invested to support young carers and especially their academic progression. Our investment of £250,000 in our digital inclusion strategy, which will be the subject of a paper to lifelong learning in March, demonstrates our practical commitment to this strategy. We will invest these funds to enhance the delivery of the key elements of the plan through provision of the right tools designed to best enhance learning. Over the weekend, when the budget options became public knowledge, I spoke to many people who had concerns about some of the proposals that we have been considering as part of this budget setting process. I want to stress that this administration considers road safety around our schools as an important priority, and I welcome the move to retain funding for crossing patrollers at various points throughout Perth and Kinross, whilst recognising that we do need to look at different ways to maintain road safety in the future, given the challenges we continue to face in recruitment. Our council officers will continue to work in partnership with Tayside Contracts, parents and schools to seek to address these issues. I was disappointed to see in the SNP amendment that they've accepted savings for skills for work and important college courses which provide additional education opportunities for our young people. Finally, with increased demands on our council services and the financial challenges this administration faces as a result of constant pressures on our budgets from the Scottish Government, we believe the commitments laid out in our motion today really will ensure that every child in Perth and Kinross has access to the best start in life, and that's something I'm very happy to support. I'd like to take a moment to switch to my local councillor role and welcome the measures in our budget that allow communities to set their own priorities. I know in the communities I serve that they're fed up with the perception that this council is telling them what priorities they have. This budget gives communities their voice, and I'm sure they would do lots of talking in the lengthy queues that would build up if we were to close the recycling centres for 3 days a week in Blairgowrie. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. Everybody in this chamber knows and understands the importance of education. Tomorrow's young learners are, today's young learners are tomorrow's citizens, and they'll shape the communities in which we live. This administration have made cuts to teachers. 524,000 secondary teachers will go in the budget for secondary teachers at a time when school rolls are rising, and Bertha Park, the flagship of PKC education, is coming on board. I'm delighted to say that the SNP budget has supported the most crucial of breakfast clubs in our most deprived areas. This administration hasn't done that. And Provost, hungry kids don't learn. 200,000 for closing the attainment gap is fine, but we need to close the gap each and every year. This 200,000 is a one-off thing. The Scottish Government's Pupil Equity Fund provides £1.6 million every year for the schools in Perth and Kinross, last year, this year, and for at least the next 3 years, and that will close the attainment gap. Lastly, there was a little bit in our budget about adverse childhood experience coordinators, and I think again we're becoming more aware now of the negative effects that adverse childhood experience have on our kids, and I would implore all the members of the Lifelong Learning Committee to try and take this forward. If we have coordinators to mitigate the worst effects of this, our education system will be much better going forward. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you for allowing me to have some time to talk about some additional spending that this administration is going to put forward that will have a real beneficial effect on the children within Perth and Kinross. It's been accepted for many years that Perth and Kinross Council has the best start of all children at the heart of its policies, and this administration, setting aside £200,000 to help young people in their developmental milestones, is a further example of this practice. All children will benefit from positive intervention, but providing tried and tested evidence-based strategies will further help to reduce the poverty-related attainment gap, which is a proposal every councillor should heartily support. I'm delighted to see additional investment in the digital learning strategy for our schools. It's imperative that education provides children with the ability to work in jobs and in environments that our generation can only imagine. This can only be met by further investment in digital tools. We have to equip our schools with the ability to teach a range of subjects in a world with ever-changing technology, and this £250,000 will help to expedite this process. I'm equally delighted to see this administration provide additional support for young carers. Young carers are under stresses and strains which affect their youth, their prospects, their well-being and their academic progression. And it's not only right but imperative that we recognise the role young carers play, value this and provide support which will assist them to achieve their potential. And finally, as a councillor of Strathearn Ward, I would like to mention how delighted I am that this administration has recognised the importance of our rural communities. With proposals like rural business expansion support, Perth and Kinross events and money for tourist routes, I can only applaud the encompassing nature of the Council's projects in this budget. It can only encourage rural areas to expand small businesses, build local annual events and encourage holidaymakers, tourists and locals alike to experience the beauty of our area, its history, culture of our region and the enthusiasm of our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to make a couple of short points. First of all, with regard to reserves, the administration's proposals see the level of reserves falling over the period by about £1 million. Our proposals see those reserves increasing by £1 million, a difference of £2 million. I've always lived by the principle of keeping a strong reserve. This administration seems to be doing the exact opposite. If a reserve is for a rainy day, I would argue that that rainy day is certainly not here yet, and I believe that the policy of removing money from the reserves is ill-advised at present. And a second point, if I may, with regard to the garden waste, the administration speak of having listened, imposing the garden waste charge, increasing it and then increasing it again, as is their proposal, does not appear to me to be indicative of listening. I think our proposals, we have listened. We've accepted that the charge is introduced, but we've taken away the planned increase and certainly have not sought to impose a further increase after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Provost. With permission, I'd like to add my support to the budget today. In respect of, I would like to address my remarks around the proposals for the Environment Service. Turning to street cleansing to begin with, the administration's budget rejects in full the proposed savings 40 and 42 in the papers. The people of Perth and Kinross are rightly proud of the environment in which we live and of our thriving tourist industry, and we in the administration feel that we cannot sacrifice the cleanliness of our streets to the detriment of residents and visitors alike, and I'm glad to see that that proposal meets with acceptance across the chamber. In respect of a couple of the other savings, it is with pleasure that we have rejected in totality the savings proposed for recycling centres, and despite what Councillor Sarwar said in seconding the motion, we have also rejected in totality the saving for winter maintenance, while the opposition are proposing to accept 60% of the cut that was proposed. I know that my colleague, Vice Convener Barnacle, would like to talk further about those issues. On planning and enforcement and tree protection officers, we are providing additional resource to ensure that developers have the necessary permission for works and that planning conditions are adhered to and trees are protected during development. This is following a number of high-profile stories on planning enforcement issues at major developments across the council area. This item has been added to our budget in direct response to concerns raised by communities. As Councillor Lyle said earlier, this administration is a listening administration. We have proposals to raise car parking charges. Following a number of years where there has been no increase in car parking charges, we propose to increase charges by 10% in 2018-19 and 2020-21. The additional income will not be available to the Council as part of our general revenue budget, as it will be ring-fenced within the car parking account. So while car parking in Perth and Kinross will still remain substantially cheaper than some of our neighbouring authorities, the increased income will allow for greater investment for the future in our car parking facilities across Perth and Kinross. One proposal, again, which meets with acceptance across the chamber, and I'm glad to see this, is the 15-minute free parking initiative, which has proved extremely popular with shoppers and traders alike. And we therefore propose to hardwire this initiative into the budget for the car parking account so that we don't have to consider and debate this separately at each succeeding budget. Turning to events income, the Council's events budget is used to great effect to put on very popular events such as the Halloween night, Christmas light switch on and Riverside light nights. But we have elected to reject the proposal to raise only £50,000 from these events by the third year of this budget and opted instead to set a more ambitious target for generating income and sponsorship for these council-run events over the 3-year period. And to expand the offering of events beyond the city itself, we are committing £100,000 to allow groups in rural areas to apply for start-up funding to get their ideas for recurring events off the ground. In this respect, we're thinking of events such as the Bookmark Festival in Blairgowrie, which goes from strength to strength each year. And we commend volunteers' efforts in organising and running that event. Turning to rural economic development. Provost, as an elected member representing a rural ward, I'm particularly pleased that our administration budget today contains as one of its 4 central themes the critical issue of rural economic development. And we have a wide-ranging battery of proposals to take forward this central theme, from Alyth to Aberfeldy and Pitlochry to Kinross. In addition to £100,000 on budget flexibility, we propose to increase funding to GrowBiz by £120,000 and offer support for our rural business expansion by £100,000. We have a small town retail facade initiative totalling £100,000 and a town centre management budget again totalling £100,000. And we have also elected to set up a micro business fund to help strivers turn their dreams into reality and start and grow their micro businesses and small businesses in the rural environment with a fund of £100,000. With these proposals brought to the fore as one of the administration's central themes, I commend our budget to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Provost. Firstly, I'd like to question the rationale of the Conservative-led administration comments in the news media that they would fight to return this service or that service or whatever. Let us not forget, it is in the administration's gift not to fight, but to merely reject some of these ideas. There is no need for headline statements, no required at all. All you do is simply reject the savings and move on to the next thing. So I would like to now highlight certain proposals that the SNP have in their budget that will improve our citizens' everyday life. We in the SNP will continue late-night bus provision. We shall commit £69,000 to continue the bus services on specified routes on Fridays and Saturdays. This will enhance rural connections. The people in my own ward would be especially welcoming this and will be very disappointed if the budget proposal by the Conservatives that only £4,000 will be left in that budget for the supply of rural bus services. Also in the rural areas, the additional funding that the SNP would put into of £100,000 into safer routes to schools will ensure that primary school children in rural villages can safely use our footways to get to schools and may cut the amount of vehicles causing congestion at the school gates that, as we are all aware of, the vehicles used on the school run fill our inboxes as councillors. Also, I'd like to commend the SNP proposal that we reject cuts to all the arm's length organisations, and we are actually proposing to pass the 0.4% uplift that the Council have received from the SNP Scottish Government, and this will benefit all those from PKC and further afield that visit these venues these alios operate on. I would like to commend this budget, the SNP budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Ahern.
Thank you, Provost. I find it incredible that the SNP are asking for a 25% reduction in the budget for community wardens. Councillor Anderson has just said that they want to improve citizens' lives. How will cutting community wardens help improve citizens' lives? The wardens are the eyes and ears of our community. I have personally experienced their value in their actions and interventions with some of the most vulnerable people in our society. We're experiencing an increase in antisocial behaviour across the whole of Perth and Kinross, especially within my own ward in the South Inch. The community wardens are an established part of keeping our community safe. They've made big gains in contact with our young people and are becoming more important with the demands being placed on our community policing teams across the whole of Perth and Kinross. Any reductions to the community wardens may increase antisocial incidents and may well increase the areas affected across the whole of Perth and Kinross. We are totally against any reductions in funding for community wardens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hearn. Councillor McEwen, please.
Thank you, Provost. My colleague, Councillor Reddick, mentioned breakfast clubs. What he didn't mention is, with the increases in the cost of actual school meals, a family of 3 in Tayside will now pay an extra £58.50 a year for their kids to eat their lunch. They're not going to get their breakfast either, because there's no breakfast clubs. Whereas our SNP administration across in Glasgow is now giving free meals to all up to primary 4 aged pupils, feeding children every day. While this Tory administration is making it harder for these children and these working families to have a meal and to be the best that they can. If that's their aspirations for our children, I don't want a part of it.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Barnacle, please.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I basically could not let the budget debate pass without giving credit to my fellow conveners of the Environment Service, Councillors Stewart and Purvis, for their sterling work in protecting that budget and proposing additional expenditure. I personally had written to administration leaders in November last, suggesting a number of budgetary concerns within the Environment Service. And I'm really pleased that most of these have been addressed in the budget motion today. As both Councillors Lyle and Stewart said, I would particularly like to mention full reinstatement of the budget for recycling centres to ensure all current local facilities remain in place, along with full reinstatement of the budget for winter maintenance to maintain the current level of footway and road network treatment. As Councillor Lyle stated, we have been able to fully reinstate the budget for grounds maintenance that were suggested as a cut. In my autumn submission, I had noted the need to maintain the community to green space budget and increase support for bloom groups, noting, as Councillor Lyle said, that we have managed to do this. I have long called for the restoration of the footpath budget. This was set at £325,000 when frozen around 2008-9. So the additional 300,000 in 2018-19 mentioned by Councillor Lyle will really help to address a list of outstanding requests. As Councillor Stewart said, the planning service clearly needs extra resources, and I'm pleased we've been able to find extra money for enforcement and tree protection that requires strengthening. The budget for ditch management at road verges has been protected, and we found additional money, as Councillor Lyle said, for road safety measures in both 2018-19 and 19-20 without borrowing for same. This will help delivery of route action plans. We have 3 in Kinross to progress. Further, in relation to roads, I had suggested restoring the recently lapsed and popular budget for adopted road schemes at £50,000, and so I'm pleased we have found a top-up for those schemes, unlike the opposition. Away from the Environment Service, I would briefly mention my personal satisfaction we have managed to maintain our full budget protection for PCABs. I'm not a fan of the nationalist Greens, but pressing the SNP government to put extra money into local authority budgets has helped with this 2018-19 financial settlement, which is a much improved outcome on what we were facing at the end of 2017, when no headroom was seemingly available. It always seems to magically appear by the end of the budget process. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to support this amendment. And 2 issues very close to my own heart as recent past, firstly as recent past convener of planning, And of course, Councillor Lyle as well, I'm sure he'll appreciate the point. Planning applicants, particularly minor applications, applicants have a great difficulty somehow or other in actually getting much communication from the planners themselves. I can understand this because there's not much to be had from the planning without targeted income from such communications. So to have in our budget that we will target a charge for those at the pre-application stage who need some advice from planners is a very welcome suggestion. The other one, also very close to, I'm sure, Councillor Lyle's heart, is our local village hall, which has toilets which are quite incapacitated simply because they are used as storage cupboards for the furniture which is used within the hall, and we do not have a proper disability access to the hall either. Now, it's very frustrating simply because there is a significant fund within the Development Trust of Ardagh to actually invest money in or around the hall. This has not been allowed to happen so far due to the school's requirement of the hall, but specifically the Development Trust would wish to put money into building a small extension for specifically the storage. Thereafter, the council may develop their toilets to an appropriate standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Bailey now.
Provost, the budget motion wins my support thanks to its inclusion of funding for numerous initiatives that will make Perth and Kinross a place where residents have an improved chance to lead independent, healthy and active lives. As others have mentioned before me, it's great that we're able to fund the Fairer Futures initiative and to do that for 3 years, not just for 1 year. As many in this chamber will know, my Labour predecessors worked so hard to shape that, and I look forward to Councillor Barrett now taking that forward in an able manner. I also commend the inclusion of items that will help those who are struggling to make ends meet get back on track. The Citizens Advice Bureau provides a vital role in assisting people in working with our sometimes labyrinthine welfare and benefits system. The Food Bank provides a vital service that should not need to feature in our society, but which fills a gap where our current system is failing people. I'm therefore happy to see that this council is able to continue to support the great work done by both organisations, and again on a 3-year period. I'm especially pleased to see that the motion includes the reinstatement of both the budgets for Play Start and Early Years Support Team. If we're to give every child a fair start in life, then it's imperative that we provide the right support to both children and carers during those vital preschool years. Funding for Play Start enables valuable parental skills courses such as Incredible Years to continue. Up to 40 creches are provided per week, enabling parents, grandparents and carers to attend courses and engage with professionals who can give expert advice. Our early years support team will be able to continue working in partnership with preschool nurseries to provide, amongst other things, support for young children who are experiencing difficulties. And finally, the budget motion is particularly interesting to me for the fact that it avoids moving the charge for the instrumental music service up to £840 a year. I'm pleased there's a pot there of £105,000 for inclusion to help those less well off to get into that. And it's worth pausing for a moment to consider that if a family of 3 are currently accessing the music service, they'll find themselves with a bill of £2,500 per year if we were to accept the SNP's proposal on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost, fellow councillors. First of all, I believe what the SNP has put forward today is a set of proposals that are both progressive but also prudent. So let me echo Councillor Parrott's comments about reserves. This is a difference between the SNP and the administration here of 2.1 million in respect of uncommitted reserves. We do need to maintain that contingency funding, in particular for major events, heaven forbid, a major flooding event, for instance, and we've got to have that cushion. Let me also echo his comments about garden waste, where that charge was brought in as a modest fee initially, to defray on costs. What is now being proposed is in the year after next an increase of 20% to £30, the year after 16% to £35. What it must not become is some kind of cash cow, similar to what you have in some councils down south, places like Harrow and Harlow, where the charge is over £90. We mustn't let that happen. I'd also echo the comments of Councillor Anderson with respect the late-night bus services and provision of bus services, also in respect of Alios, where there's a similarity between the administration and ourselves in year one, but there really is a question mark about year one and year two and year three going forward, and the future and the viability of those Alios, like Culture Perth and Kinross. But I also want to turn to the question, and I'm not clear yet in my own mind, of what the Conservatives are putting forward, and that's in terms of workforce planning. Because this council has a proud record over the last 5 years in terms of its transformation programmes of not going for compulsory redundancies. We've gone for voluntary service, severance payments. We've gone for sometimes posts not being filled. Sometimes it's been very difficult. But I think it's important in terms of staff morale that there is an indication, and you can't give a 100% guarantee, that there will not be compulsory redundancies. And we in the SNP have strived with every sinew to get to that position. But there's an obverse side to that, and it's a learn, innovate, growth philosophy. And one of the most fascinating things, I think, with what the administration's put forward is in terms of training. And I think they've just missed it out. In terms of service, in terms of training, 25,000 on childcare strategy. In terms of the Environment Service, where they want to cut the training budget from, I believe, 130,000 to 110,000, that's a cut of 15%. But the most remarkable one of all, despite all the talk about digital inclusion strategy and digital services as part of our smart growth infrastructure, is actually training for information technology staff. They're proposing a cut there of over 30%, 31%, from 32,000 to 22,000. I think it's absolutely vital as a council in terms of both staff morale and pushing up our workforce and giving them the ability so they can realise their full potential. But it's also vital in terms of productivity and how we can deliver better services and transform ourselves going forward. And I think that's a major omission on the part of this Tory-led administration. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. It's now Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. I'm really pleased to be able to support the budget put forward by the administration. I thought it might have been a difficult process to produce a budget with a mixed administration with independents, Labour member, ourselves and the Conservatives, but in fact it wasn't. And we've actually produced a budget which actually reaches all parts of Perth and Kinross, reaches people with serious inequalities and people who, in real difficulties, and actually allows the council to actually do the work it's there to do. But the one thing that actually amazed me about the budget was the fact it just highlighted the difference in philosophy between the Liberal Democrats and my colleagues, I suggest, and the nationalist members of the council. In as much as they sort of pick money and say, we'll give that to that, and that to that, and that to that, where we have come forward with a community fund which will be spent throughout in every single ward in Perth and Kinross. It will be spent by the people within that ward. It will be spent by the ward councillors. It will be spent in conjunction with the community council, and that money amounts to £100,000 per ward over the next 2 years. As a councillor, I now, for the last few years, have had people coming to me, can we get this sorted? And I go to the council, oh, there's no real budget for that. Can I get that sorted? That's a difficulty. There's no real budget for that. Well, now that will no longer be the case. We'll have money to actually do the little things that people want and get done quickly. So that's a difference. We are a council which says we'll support you to get things done. We'll make sure the decision taken is taken as far down the stream as possible and be taken in local communities. It's not a top-down administration, it's a ground-up administration. And that's the one big thing that's come from this administration, and I'm delighted about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. It's Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to echo the comments already made by Councillor Parrott and Councillor Donaldson and add my own take on things. The SNP is a listening party. We hear the public outcry against the garden waste charge being rolled out by this council in April. The Tories say that they are responsive to the residents of Perth and Kinross, and yet, not content with a £25 charge in 2018-19, they propose further increases totalling 40% in the following 2 years. This is an outrage. And I know the people of Perth and Kinross will see behind the rhetoric of this Tory Lib Dem Labour coalition and give this administration a clear message that this disgraceful increase to the charges is just not on and flies in the face of the aims of an environmentally responsible council. I also want to flag up the fact that the SNP amendment is making proposals for a thorough review of commuter parking in residential areas and starting with a residential car parking permit trial over the river in the Ganachie area of Perth City as we seek to try and combat the widespread parking issues that are all around us. And I'm very disappointed that there is nothing in the Tory budget that is even seeking to address this in any way.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Forbes, please.
Thank you, Provost. Well, what a difference a day makes, because just yesterday I was reading that Pete Wishart was going to start a campaign to stop the garden waste collection charge. And here we are, the SNP proposal is to keep it after all. I'm not surprised, given it was their proposal in the first place. In fact, Councillor Donaldson almost admitted that fact just a couple of minutes ago, but he managed just to pull himself back from saying it. Mr. Wishart seems to be getting a bit forgetful. He's forgotten this was their plan. He's forgotten that they introduced it. He's forgotten they voted for it. And he's forgotten that they thought it was a good idea. I suggest he goes and buys some ginkgo biloba because I believe that helps with memory loss. As you know, this charge is expected to generate over 840,000. And given that this council has been under enforced austerity for 8 years by the SNP government, we need every penny we can find. £840,000 is a lot of money, Provost. It will pay the salaries of teachers, care workers and street sweepers. It allows us to keep our recycling centres open, despite the SNP's best efforts to reduce some from 7 days to 4 and to close environment entirely. It allows us to continue to provide swimming lessons for children, and it allows us to maintain winter maintenance. I learned yesterday that Clackmannanshire Council, a nationalist-led council, are considering stopping garden waste collection entirely. While some people don't want to pay for this, at £1 per fortnight, it's better than having absolutely no collection at all. Now, this administration recognises people want services, and we know they need to be paid for. Now, finally, I have some emails here, Convener, from constituents in my ward. Now, these are not complaints about the garden waste charge. These are from residents who don't currently get a garden bin, and we'd be delighted to pay £25 to have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Waters, please.
Thank you, Provost. IT training is not just important, it's vital. History teaches the high-risk nature of large IT projects or any type of IT projects. If we look at the borders, e-borders, 700 million plus project that was basically shelved because it never worked. And here we have cuts of 30%, just slightly over 30% coming through. These projects led to most organisations investing in specialised IT training, including robust IT management, project management training. Cutting IT training by 30% will increase the risks these projects, whether it's through available IT skills or project management skills. There are a number of risks related to this cut. The morale of IT staff. IT staff need training. They need to keep advancing. If you're not providing training for them, these high-skilled staff will look elsewhere to where that training can be provided. So maintaining the staff will be at risk. And the other risk is that if we fall behind with the skills, if you don't invest in key skills within IT, then you open the risk that to achieve what we need to achieve within the council, we have to go to expensive external consultancy, far outstripping any £10,000 saving that you could potentially get from this. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Illingworth, please. I'm only going to take about another 2 or 3 either side before we finish. So I'll try and even it up so we're all on the same level, if you like.
Okay. Thank you, Provost. Can I take this opportunity to congratulate the administration on 4 positive proposals that will greatly benefit the ward of Almden that I represent. Number 1, £120,000 of additional funding for Grow Biz to expand into other areas of rural Perthshire to assist with micro business development and becoming self-employed. Number 2, £200,000 to provide a commercial development fund to support the evolution of investment propositions with the private sector. Number 3, £50,000 to establish Heart of Scotland touring routes around Perth and Kinross that link existing transport routes and promote tourist business. Number 4, £100,000 for start-up funding for recurring events in Perthshire and Kinrossshire to attract visitors from outside the immediate area. Provost, these 4 proposals will benefit Almden in the following ways. Firstly, they will develop local employment in Almden and incidentally increase incomes for the council. Secondly, they will reduce carbon emissions through reductions in commuting to Perth and beyond. Thirdly, they will promote a greater sense of community in rural areas. We all know that where there is a community spirit, where people feel they belong, all sorts of things go better. For example, less vandalism and litter, better school performance, and improved health outcomes, etc., etc. Provost, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. I'm going to take 2 on either side, so Councillor Williamson, please.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to support the SNP budget. There was an earlier intervention about community wardens, whilst failing to mention you failed to provide additional funding for the Aberfeldy warding. So, well done. 1 in 4 women are affected by domestic abuse at some point in their lives as well. The £30,000 funding that we're proposing within the SNP budget to invest in Perthshire Women's Aid will increase the knowledge and awareness of the signs of abuse and what to do about it. With the historic decision by the Scottish Parliament to pass the Domestic Abuse Scotland Bill on the 1st of February this year, the need for the increased services is even more prominent. This service will develop community capacity and resilience to manage the impact of domestic abuse and enable the early disclosure and intervention for those affected. This would represent an extension of the existing outreach service which serves Perthshire. But it's a new way of working to make the best use of the goodwill that's currently experienced in the community and encourage community members who wish to help to become ambassadors
a point of contact for information and link into Perthshire Women's Aid Services. So we need to increase the understanding of the cohesive control and encourage women to come forward to make use of these new protections and the knowledge that they will be listened to. I also believe it's important that we do support people to engage in their healthy lifestyles, and they will welcome the long-term health benefits that this brings to the communities that we serve. And providing financial assistance for the Active Under 10s and Cycling Smart campaign demonstrates our commitment to this. When it was originally opened, the Perth Leisure Centre was reportedly the second most visited attraction in Scotland after Edinburgh Castle. And our £25,000 continued support for the PH2O project demonstrates our continued support in revitalising this valuable asset within Perthshire.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Now, I'll take Councillor McDade next, and then Councillor Purvis, Laying, and then Wilson.
Thank you very much, Provost. After years of significant investment in Perth City by this council, I'm pleased to see significant investment being proposed in our rural communities by both administration and opposition budgets. I'm pleased to see the rejection of large sections of the proposed savings in the Education and Children's Services budgets, including the rejection of the devolved school management budget by the administration and the rejection of the Skills for Work college courses provided by Perth College UHI. And as a former student representative, I know how important those courses are. I'm further pleased to see the rejection of school crossing patrollers and school primary school teachers. I'm very pleased to see the rejection of proposed savings that would have seen both Aberfeldy and Pitlochry recycling centres closed, and was disappointed that the SNP's amendment does propose the closure of Pitlochry, well, take it down to 4 days a week. As a councillor for the most rural ward, where we experience snow and ice on a regular basis, I'm pleased also to see that there is a rejection of the winter maintenance savings by the administration. Many constituents have been in touch over the last week concerned about the potential effect on the look of our beautiful Highland Perthshire by cuts proposed to community green space, and I'm pleased to see the reinstatement of this budget and further investment in this department. I welcome the SNP amendment that would have seen the investment in my ward. However, all of these proposals that they have put forward could be paid for out of new funds proposed by the administration, such as the 1.2 million Community Investment Fund and the 600,000 additional road safety measures. Community empowerment should be about letting our communities decide how they want their money spent. I'm pleased to see the investment in small town retail facade, which will benefit towns like Pitlochry and Aberfeldy, and was a policy in my manifesto last May. And I'm also pleased to see the proposed microgrant fund for businesses, and this is very much welcome and needed by rural businesses. My ward heavily relies on tourism, and the increased support for rural business and tourism is very welcome indeed. There are many aspects of both the administration motion and the opposition amendment that I like and would benefit my ward. As an independent, and I'm perhaps one of the only councillors who came in today, I did not know which way they would be voting when I walked in here. However, I have taken careful consideration of both the motion and the amendment, and I feel overall that the administration motion best protects services important to my ward, an extremely rural ward that covers 43% of Perth and Kinross Council's landmass, and that significant investment is well overdue in our rural communities, and measures such as those proposed by the administration will help achieve this. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Provost. In his speech, when he moved his amendment, the Leader of the Opposition accused some councillors in this administration of crying crocodile tears over some of the proposals contained within the report. And he also posed the question from whom we were protecting public services. Well, I think now we have an answer with the opposition's amendment. It is quite clear that we are defending public services from the SNP. While this administration is investing in our young people and our families with money to close the poverty-related attainment gap and new funding to support the expansion of our digital learning strategy, the SNP have cut many aspects of our educational offering. Unlike this administration, the SNP have removed the £177,000 for the devolved school management budget for resources which can be used to fund essential items such as textbooks. And they have also cut the funding to our Skills for Work courses, which provide a wide range of vocational subjects and courses for our senior pupils, which was very disappointing. I was also very disappointed to see some of the savings that had been suggested under the Environment Service and the disproportionate effect that this would have on our rural communities. Contrary to what was suggested by Fiona Sarwar when she seconded the amendment, the SNP have proposed a £370,000 saving from the winter maintenance budget, which would have meant a 20% reduction in the roads network coverage, which would have a significant impact on our rural communities. And I was also very disappointed to see the proposal to reduce the opening hours of the recycling centres in Blairgowrie, in Crieff, in Kinross and in Pitlochry to 4 days a week, which is again disproportionately hitting those residents and businesses in our local communities across Perth and Kinross. As Councillor Robertson alluded to, while the opposition have sought to tell communities what the SNP might think they want, we believe as an administration that it should be up to our communities to decide how they want to determine their own priorities, and the £1.2 million Community Investment Fund will go a long way to help this objective. I'm delighted that we have listened to our local communities throughout this budget process and reflected their priorities in our motion today. We have ensured that vital services on which our constituents rely are protected, especially those in education and children's services and in the Environment Service, and have made significant further investments in our children and families. Moreover, in particular, two of the administration's key themes today, namely local infrastructure and rural economic development, highlight a clear change of approach for this new administration and this council. We have made a conscious effort to rebalance the spending across the county to ensure that our rural communities no longer feel as if they have been left behind. This is a budget that I believe our constituents across Perth and Kinross can wholeheartedly endorse, and I am very happy to support it today. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Councillor Grant Lane.
Thanks, Provost, and thanks for getting my name correct. Appreciate it.
I've been practising.
I've sat here, this is my sixth budget meeting, and I've found this some humorous comments, mainly from Councillor Forbes, where he didn't seem to realise that the budget, it was a provisional budget last year, and it was completely within the administration's gift whether to proceed with the charge for brown waste collection or not. It was proposed, it was obviously your choice. So it's irrelevant if it was meant or not. So that was the humour, because he said that it would raise money to provide more teachers when in his the administration's budget we're looking to cut teachers. So that was even more humorous. Moving on to Councillor Lyle, in his motion he stated that this is a listening administration. Well, he must be listening to a different set of constituents than I am. The ones I'm hearing from I've not heard from anyone who's asking for a rise in their brown bin collection next year and then asking for a rise again the following year. So I'd be interested to know who's asked for that. Also, however, I have heard from many constituents about the atrocious state of the road surface throughout Perth and Kinross. This is a flagship policy announced with a flourish in the usual Tory raid on reserves. This policy has singularly failed, and there is no provision in the Tory budget to improve the situation. As in many previous years, this SNP amendment commits substantial amounts to tackle the epidemic of potholes and rutted roadways, with a further £5 million committed to repairs. The talk of improving the offer for tourists and visitors to the area must surely start with providing a decent road surface for them on which to travel. This affects everybody in Perth and Kinross, and it is a glaring omission in the administration budget. Then credulity came to me when the Labour councillor complained here about rises in the IMS, but at the same time signs up to cutting breakfast clubs, putting up the price of school meals, and not providing extra provision for welfare right members in the face of his Tory friends' drive towards universal credit. Socialism seems to be dead in Perth and Kinross Council, and the members who were here before that he referenced must be apoplectic. I was going to say something else which was incorrect. I have to say also, in general, the ALIOs, the administration have complained about the settlement or the grant from the Scottish Government, and yet they are not passing this on and are giving further pressures to the people who deliver services on our behalf. Again, this is unacceptable. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. And finally, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Provost. I want to pay tribute, first of all, to Councillor Dave Dugan. He was very pleasant to me on my 70th birthday. He was even more effusive in his remarks when we were having Christmas lunch. And today he paid tribute to my political party. I'm a worried man, Provost. Much has been said about the garden waste charges. The reality was this was introduced by the SNP administration at the time, and if they had any thoughts of slowing that process down or cancelling it, I'm sure they would have let the officers know before the council elections in May, because there's a very long lead time into making these quite substantial changes. However, we have it now and we're there. We should press on with this. I'm quite certain about that, and I support the increase in charge. I find it incongruous that the SNP should now be wavering about this and saying, well, let's maybe not do bits of it, because they're proposing to close the Inverarmond Recycling Centre, which is one place that in an expanding area of Perth will be available for folk who don't want to pay the charges to take their green waste. So that doesn't quite seem to add up in my book. Let me turn to schools for a minute. I commend the administration's proposals for closing the poverty-related attainment gap. This is a fund of 200k, which will go towards helping directly to schools, which will help schools and will complement the funding provided by the Scottish Government in terms of helping to achieve attainment in areas where the targeting is most required. And also in restoring the devolved school management budgets, this is something that head teachers and parents and pupils will welcome. It would appear that whilst the SNP are very keen to speak about roads, they've forgotten property maintenance and have left out putting any money back into the property maintenance budget. And that, in my mind, is a major flaw. Let's come to the food bank. I was involved directly in the food bank. It was me that invited the chairman in to have discussions in November with John Fife and to look at how we could help the food bank. We've delivered on that. We've delivered, as I think Councillor Barrett said, the 10k this year to help them balance their books, but we're also delivering 20k for 3 years in comparison to the SNP's 5k per year. I think the public will amply see who is committed to the food bank proposals. Councillor Robertson, I think, spoke about the Community Investment Fund, and it just demonstrates yet again the approach the administration has about involving communities and involving consultation and involving reality, whereas the SNP seem to have a top-down approach to deciding, we'll decide what's going where. The administration are also putting money into footpaths and cycle networks of 300k, absolutely essential, both in the towns and rural areas. Finally, Provost, the business proposals that are contained on page 8 of the notes we received this afternoon of Perthshire and Kinross events, Perthshire and Kinross tourist routes, the small town retail facade and the town centre management, which have been referred to briefly, but I just want to say this fund of almost £500,000 will enable rural communities and small towns to get involved with their communities and what they would like to see to involve economic activity and growth within these parts of Perth and Kinross. I commend the budget to you, Provost.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think we've given it a fair crack of the whip. My apologies to those who haven't had an opportunity to speak. I think everybody on my right has had an opportunity. Some of you here had your hands up, but I'm afraid we have to stop at some point. Can I invite Councillor Lyle to sum up, please?
Thank you very much, Provost. Firstly, on the theme of appraisals, etc., I think it might be useful to have an appraisal of the sound system of this chamber shortly. Provost, firstly, I'd like to thank all elected members from across the floor for their contributions this afternoon. This has been an interesting and challenging debate for us all today. I'd like to return to the themes of our proposal today Provost, and initially I'll start with children and families, and remind people that we are reinstating $5 million of proposed savings in education and children's services, and we're proposing to spend an additional £900,000 in this area. As for fairness, with our partners in this administration, we are putting forward £1 million to make Perth and Kinross one of the fairest places to live in Scotland. We are also ensuring that the Integration Joint Board gets the same uplift on funding as we in the Council have. This has not been the case in other areas. As for local infrastructure, we are rejecting over £4 million of savings for the Environment Service, and we are proposing to spend more than £2.4 million in extra new expenses to improve infrastructure in our communities. Finally, in rural economic development, we are investing £1.25 million towards improving economic development across Perth and Kinross. I'd just like to remind members one or two of the comments that were made this afternoon. I'd like to remind our SNP colleagues that they introduced the garden waste charge, and hopefully they're not all suffering from amnesia this afternoon. I'd like to remind Councillor Donaldson that we only actually receive a one-year budget settlement from his SNP government in Holyrood. He questions our sound governance, I would question theirs. I note that the SNP have proposed funding for the PH2O project, which is a bit cynical considering they've sat on this project for years. This is a budget today is an ambitious budget for Perth and Kinross that protects our vital public services and invests in the priorities of our rural communities. Provost, I'm delighted to commend this budget to the Council.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote. I'll ask Gillian Taylor, Head of Democratic Services, to remind you of the Council voting procedure.
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, we're dealing with item 3 on the agenda this afternoon, which is the revenue budget for 2018-19, 19-20 and 2021. And you have report 18/47 by Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance. You have a motion by Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Barrett, copies of which have been circulated on what I am reliably informed by the Chief Accountant is salmon-coloured paper. You have an amendment by Councillor Dugan, seconded by Councillor Sarwar, copies of which have been circulated on yellow paper. In terms of standing orders, the amendment will be set against the motion. Also in terms of standing orders, all votes are by roll call, so when I call your name, can you please indicate clearly whether you're voting for the motion or the amendment. I would remind members that in the event of a tied vote, the Provost has a casting vote. Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Motion.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Band. Councillor Barnacle.
Motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates. Councillor Harry Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Dugan.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Ling.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor Ros McCall. Councillor Sheila McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Provost Malloy.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott.
Amendment.
Councillor Pover. Amendment. Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Sarwar. Amendment. Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Simpson.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Councillor Williamson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Thank you, councillors. I have 24 votes for the motion, 15 votes for the amendment. The motion is therefore carried.
Thank you, Gillian. Item 4, the last item on the agenda, is the reserve strategy. Can I invite Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to speak on the reserve strategy.
Thank you, Provost. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Are there any questions on the report or points of clarification? No. Councillor Lyle, would you like to move the motion?
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief. This administration is committed to building on the Council's excellent reputation for financial management. The proposals for earmarking general fund balances outlined in the report include funds to support the Council Transformation Programme as we ensure that this Council is ready to meet the demands of the 21st century. Moreover, there are a number of political and economic risks facing local authorities across Scotland. In addition to the fact that the Scottish Government has only given this Council a one-year funding settlement, which I mentioned when moving the budget earlier, there are also additional uncertainties over other factors such as pay awards, inflation and severe weather events. It is therefore only prudent to have money set aside for the future. Our administration's budget earlier today committed 3.6% of the Council's net revenue towards uncommitted general fund reserves. This will ensure that Perth and Kinross Council is ready to meet any future challenges should they arise. Provost, I am happy to move this report and commend it to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, would you like to second the motion?
Very briefly, Provost, I'm grateful to the Head of Finance as the proper officer for the preparation of this report on the reserve strategy and on the brevity of his introduction to the report. The Council has an enviable reputation and record for sound financial management and planning, of which the reserve strategy plays an important part. The balance needs to be struck against the need for protecting the Council and local residents against significant risks and contingencies, and ensuring that the financial resources of the Council are deployed to best support the priorities of the Council, which is where colleagues to the west side of the Chamber seem to be content to bury their talents and resources rather than use them properly. The strategy continues allocating reserves which will allow the Council to deliver on transformation of Council services, facilitate workforce management and staff reductions with sensitivity which recognises the contributions that staff have made to this organisation, and I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any amendments? No. Comments or contributions? No. Councillor Lyle, can you sum up?
Just happy to move.
Thank you. I don't think we need to go through the voting process. Thank you very much, everybody. And can I just say, can I say agreed? Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Can I just thank you for the good-natured way the debate has been going on? Willie's shaking his head. I thought it was very good. Thank you very much.